Well, it's long been a local curiosity, but after a city council vote last night, it will soon be a local landmark. Here to unravel the history and mystery of the Whetstonian building at the corner of Union and Jefferson Streets in downtown Jacksonville is local author and historian Tim Gilmore. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning, Ann.
So many people have driven past this eclectic looking building and wondered, what is it? And you actually stopped once to find out and ended up writing a lot about it. Tell us, first of all, what this building looks like and why it's such an interesting, eye-catching vision in the city.
It's hard to describe, but so many people, as you've said, have seen it. If you start describing it, they go, "Oh, I know what you're talking about." It's more than one building. The main building is a brick two-story building on the corner of Jefferson and Union Street. And then beside that is a smaller 1960s era insurance building. And that is on the corner of Jefferson and
State.
State. Yeah. And at one point, there were actually some shotgun houses in between those two buildings. Those are gone now. But Walter Whetstone,
And
who,
we should say we're
yeah.
showing some images now. If people are
Oh,
watching
okay.
on the live stream, they can kind of see some of
Great.
your pictures.
Okay, great. Yeah. Walter Whetstone named it the Whetstonian. He was a retired, he did a lot of things in his life, insurance salesman, but he, to my mind, people have been saying folk artist. I've often use the phrase outsider artist. And he had decades of salvage things he had picked up here and there, all sorts of things, and he wove them into the complex of buildings there. I mean, he made them. This isn't just a place where these things are displayed, but they are actually made part of the
The structure
totality of it.
almost. Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. So when you go by, you might notice mannequin legs. You might notice the interior of a piano that's made part of a wall. You might notice glass bottles. You might notice a head of Harriet Tubman. Just all kinds of things. I don't think anybody is. I don't know if Walter had it inventoried in his head. There's so much there.
There was stories that you've written, stories that the Florida Times Union has written. They describe just kind of a mosaic of items. I mean, he also did mosaics on the walls, but
Hmm.
items that include, La Villa signs and carousel horses and antique clocks and trombones and
Yeah,
saxophones
yeah,
and
yeah.
flugelhorns hanging from the ceiling.
Lots of musical instruments.
Yeah. I guess you found out that his dad used to sort of collect
Mm.
stuff and
Hmm.
he just kind of picked up the habit.
Yeah, his dad drove an ice truck, and he would drive around and pick things up, and he told me that he picked that habit up from his dad. And to what you alluded to a minute ago, I wondered what in the world this strange place was lots of times, and I think it was about 2012. When I first wrote about it, because I stopped by. I saw him sitting outside. I didn't know him at the time, and he would do this. He would sit outside of this strange, fascinating place in the middle of summer, wearing a white dress shirt. And I just I parked and I walked up to him and asked him what the place was, and he said, "Come on inside." And I was like, "What? Really?" And he was so open and welcoming, and he wanted people to see it. He was kind, he was gentle, he was really funny. He had just this great sense of humor. He called it the Whetstonian. He said, if Smithson can have the Smithsonian, then Whetstone can have the Whetstonian. One day I went by, he was wearing there's Whetstone chocolates in St. Augustine. And one day I went by and he's wearing a Whetstone chocolates hat, and I commented on it, and he said he went there and said, "You're Whetstone chocolate and I'm chocolate Whetstone." And he said he would say,
Because he's a black
yeah,
man was
right.
I guess his joke there, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
okay.
his joke. Yep. He would say things like, there's a lot of black history around here, including me. And,
Huh.
Yeah, he was just a wonderful, personality.
So, one of the reasons that the city council has chosen to recognize the historic value of this building is the building, but also its place in La Villa, which is a place that, as you've reported on and written about at great length, was largely destroyed
Right,
during urban renewal. It's
right,
called the River City Renaissance. And basically, that involved taking down most of the buildings in La Villa, which was a historic and at one time thriving Black community
right,
in
right.
Jacksonville. It was actually kind of a suburb of Jacksonville.
Yeah, that's
It's pretty much downtown, but
that's
yeah.
true, that's true. Yeah, when Jacksonville was just this, postage stamp that is now part of downtown, not even all of what we think of as downtown. La Villa was a suburb of Jacksonville in the 1800s. That's true. Um, And of course, so many people have written about the rich musical history of La Villa. Now famous musicians like a ragtime blues musician, Blind Blake, played there and lived there or lived in Brooklyn, right next to La Villa. Famous musicians ranging from Jelly Roll Morton to Ella Fitzgerald came through La Villa, spent time there.
Ray Charles.
Absolutely, Ray Charles. Yeah. So it does have this incredible history. It also suffered what so many urban Black neighborhoods suffered in the middle of the 20th century, and by the early 1990s, Mayor Ed Austin's River City Renaissance Plan included raising uh, something like 30 square blocks, more than that, I think, actually, of La Villa. There are a few of the old buildings left, including the Whetstonian. He bought it. He bought the buildings in the late 90s. He told me that the sewage lines had already been disconnected by the city, and he had to pay to have them reconnected. And
Hmm.
so,
Was his goal like saving the building because La Villa was being torn down, or did he just happen upon it and it seemed to suit him?
I think it's more the latter, but I think it's a mix of both. I don't know that he had it in mind to, you know, to do this to do preservation, and obviously he altered the building, extensively.
Sure.
So for preservation purists, that would not have been ideal, but he made it into not just a historic, a building that's historically significant, but a work of art. So I think most of us who appreciate the Whetstonian that way would say that he greatly improved it beyond the historical significance it already would have had.
And there really are very few original La Villa buildings left. I mean, there's a few shotgun houses that were
Hmm.
preserved, the old Brewster Hospital, which
Right.
has been restored, the
Yeah.
Ritz, which has the original wall,
The original wall, right.
the Clara White Mission, and
Claire White
that's about
Mission.
it.
There's a few things here and there. There's a house, I've written about this on my website too, Jack Psycho Geo, that Padrica Mendez
Oh,
lives in
a
downtown.
beautiful old
Beautiful
house.
La Villa, beautiful old house.
Mhm.
Yeah, but there's not many.
So, Whetstone's creation, I mean, some people have compared it to kind of a Howard
Hmm.
Finster, Paradise Gardens, excuse me, type thing where he's just kind of adorning and adding and, creating. Um, and so it's a special place in that way. Did he regard himself as an artist?
He did not. No. I talked to him about that, and he laughed at the idea of himself as an artist. I, you know,
What did he did he just think he was a collector? Like, what did he think he was doing? Because he wasn't just
That's a good question.
he wasn't just displaying it, as you say, he was
That's
kind of
right.
making it into something
I
else.
mean, he had a vision, I never heard him exactly characterize it, but I think people have when they hear art or artist, sometimes they have certain connotations that don't fit what they think of themselves. So the reference to Howard Finster, this is why I've always thought of Walter Whetstone as an outsider artist. The idea of outsider art, or sometimes it's called art brut, which is French for raw art. is the idea of people who are not trained in the arts, and but they create and they create, you know, I don't want to say manically because that sounds like it has
But kind of
some
compulsively.
compulsively. That's the right word.
Mhm.
Yeah, and there are people like Howard Finster in Athens, Georgia, with his Paradise Garden, or Eddie Owens Martin, who called himself Saint Eom, and built this very strange, wonderful place called Passaquan near Columbus, Georgia. I went on a road trip with Wayne Wood and several other people. Wayne Wood led the road
Local
trip there.
historian Wayne Wood,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. About 8 years ago or so. Simone Rodia, who built the Watts Towers in L.A. These are people who they didn't go to art school. They did not think in terms of an art career. They did very strange things or outside the artistic norms or any other kind of norms. But there's no way that you could look at what they did and see it as anything but creative, visionary. Even if you don't get the vision, you have to see that there's vision there.
Yeah. And so he was actually featured on the History Channel's American
Oh,
Pickers
right,
show.
right.
So it wasn't that people didn't recognize there was sort of something really unique in this
Mm,
Jacksonville space.
mm. You know, toward the end, he would have. So he passed away in 2018. He had had a few strokes. He was 81 years old. Um, Toward the end, he would have yard sales or whatever you want to call them
Mm.
there, and people would come by and buy pieces out of his collection. And I've actually never watched that episode, that American
I
Pickers
get the sense you're not
episode.
a fan of the
So
enterprise.
so many people are. To me, they're digress for just a second and bring it back to this. There are these outside the Whetstonian. There are these two big tin plates that are on poles, and both of them have quotes from architects. One of them has a quote from the architect Mies van der Rohe that says, "The structure is the whole from top to bottom to the last detail with the same ideas." The other one is a Frank Lloyd Wright quote. Says, "Every curve and line has to have real meaning. It cannot be arbitrary." I don't know where Walt got these things, but to me, they apply to the Whetstonian. There's an overall vision there that you can see in each of the parts of the thing. So I get people wanting to buy this strange piece of it and that strange piece of it, and the American Pickers kind of enterprise. I understand that. Personally, I would really like to see it. Be preserved as Walt's vision.
Yeah. And so with the historic designation, I mean, what does that provide for, and just kind of briefly, because we don't have a ton of time left,
Yeah.
but what does it mean for the building? What is it? I'm guessing historic preservation is a bit of a challenge sometimes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And of course, there are historic preservation pioneers in this town that are heroes. Yeah, I'm glad that this happened. And his wife, his widow Dot Whetstone, uh, uh, saw this
Is she still in the
through.
building?
They lived in Springfield. She has a house in Springfield, but she does visit the building at times. I have talked to and heard other people talk about means of saving it throughout the years. I think the Museum of Contemporary Art downtown actually had, there was some thinking there about possibilities of saving it. Arts leaders and preservation leaders in the past have talked about saving it. So I don't know. I don't know what the future is, but I'm glad that city council voted the way they voted.
And you guess he'd be glad too?
Yeah, he would. You
Mhm.
know, there was, I think, toward the end, I think there was some sadness in him about, people not seeing whatever the vision was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right. Well, Tim Gilmore, love talking to you about Walter Whetstone. Thanks so much for being here.
absolutely.